Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Lead, Sell, Grow, the Human Experience Podcast. I'm your host, Eric Konovalov, and today's world is experiencing a ton of challenges. We got so many people being laid off. We got people quitting. We got people looking for work. And my guest today comes with 20 plus years of experience as a people leader of global remote teams for international high growth brands like Honeywell and Mattel. Sarah Fern is no stranger to complex challenges that HR teams face today. And that's exactly what we're going to be talking about. I can't wait. This is going to be super exciting. Now, as the company's chief people officer for Velocity Global, Sarah is helping businesses worldwide, not just in her country, which as soon as she starts speaking, you'll figure out where she's located, but worldwide. Identify, hire, and train top talent from over 185 countries, all while giving employees the freedom to work from anywhere. Now, the biggest thing I'm hearing is I'd like to work from X, but the company I want to work for is, located far away. How do I do that? Sarah, welcome to the show.
Eric, it's my pleasure to be here.
Yeah, this is gonna be a fun conversation. So right now you're handling all human resources operations like globally for this company. How did you get there? I want to know the Sarah story. How does a woman, like, where did you start out and how did you get to where you are now?
So, do you want me to start like 25 years ago? I started in sales and I ended up in the people business. And, you've mentioned the companies I've worked for. I've had global teams, worked with international groups and companies for a long time. I was a client of the company I now work for, Velocity Global. And that was about 8 years ago. And when I had the opportunity to join almost 2 years ago, I was thrilled. But we haven't told our listeners yet what Velocity Global is and what they do. So shall we talk about that?
We'll yeah, we can talk about that. I think we'll get there. I think we'll get there. I want to hear more about you. Like, what were you selling and in what capacity were you a client for Velocity Global?
Yes, good question. So when I left university, I started out as an account executive a long, long time ago. And I was selling, it was called HCM systems at the time. The talk track was around, hey, HR leader, you've got all these systems, but they don't talk with each other. They're not connecting. Wouldn't it be wonderful to have that one platform? That one platform was called Zynab at the time. It was a kind of up and starting kind of company in London, the United Kingdom at the time. I don't think they're around anymore. But what happened there, Eric, why it's relevant to this conversation is that I got the opportunity every single day to talk to HR leaders, to people leaders around the world. What are your challenges? What keeps you up at night? What are the kind of biggest problems? That was 25 years ago. And it inspired me so much that I wanted to be one of those in the future. I was like, okay, I want to be where you are. This is so interesting. No day is the same. The problems you're kind of tackling every day. Wow, just really interesting. And so I then went from being an account executive to, starting at the bottom of the kind of pecking order in the world of HR, getting some qualifications there. I've never looked back, but what has happened, why this is significant, Eric, is I always have the lens of the client. I always have the lens of the, is it making sense? Is it easy? Is it complicated? Is it user-friendly? Does it look good? We live in a world where we don't buy into the concept of the 80-page handbook. We don't buy into the concept of it's complicated. It takes me 2 hours to read the manual. You lose people on that journey. So I want to call that out because I don't think I've ever lost that lens of being on the other side. HR has so many, different reputations, and I try every day to be something different and to build something different for this world.
Yeah. So when I was in the corporate world, HR to me, like you said, they have different reputations. I equated them to the principal's office because I was in there quite a bit. Like you asked,
Interesting. Tell me more.
Or what did you say to this person? And yeah, it was I got to learn, I got to learn, and not in the best ways, but that was my experience with HR. What are some of the challenges that human resources people or leaders are facing globally today? And is it different in some parts of the world than others?
Powerful question. We could probably write a book about this one together. So I'll try and keep it short. What are the challenges? I think the challenges are coming in thick and fast. You have, companies who want to, bring people back into offices. So you have that entire, debate and argument about, hybrid, remote, full-time in the office. I was interviewing someone last week, why are you looking to move? My company has asked me to come back 3 days a week. I've moved away in the pandemic. I cannot do that. I want to find a new job. It could be as simple as that. It's that mandating how you work, mandating where you work. That's one really big thing that's still with us. It hasn't quite left us yet. We have been hearing about the Great Resignation for that same reason, where the workers say, actually, I want to do what I want to do. I want to be trusted. I don't want to work for a company that tries to monitor me or tries to micromanage me. I want to have that freedom. And then also, sadly, and you mentioned that earlier, we are in a very, very volatile world right now where there probably isn't a day where we're not hearing about layoffs. Again, I woke up this morning, I'm based in the United Kingdom. I wake up in the mornings, there's another tech layoff that's happened overnight. And it's dramatic and it impacts lives. I was talking to a friend in San Francisco a couple of weeks ago, and she said, my entire neighborhood has been laid off. These are the Metas, the Twitters, and others. And so these are the realities. We have hyperinflation. You asked me about what does global look like? How may it be different? We have countries out there where the money that you are making, and that was good money you were making, doesn't pay for everything anymore. It doesn't cover your rent, maybe. It doesn't pay for your bread or your butter. In the UK, which is not necessarily a great data point, but, butter, because of the war in Ukraine, has gone up 4 times. Just one data point, butter. Yes.
Huh.
So, it doesn't mean people stop eating butter, but, the message here is that we have all these challenges right on our doorstep. And what are we going to do, about those, if anything, right? Do we have the power to do anything here?
Yeah. Wow. That's really interesting. Okay. So now let's get into Velocity Global. It's a very interesting concept. Incredible company from the research that I've done and us talking before the show. Let the listeners know what Velocity Global is.
Velocity Global helps you grow and hire and employ people all over the world. So
Does it help people get employed all over the world as well, or is this just? I mean, I guess one has to deal with the other, right?
So we're talking about a global platform of work, and this platform gives employers and companies all over the world the opportunity and the option to hire in places where maybe legally they're not set up to hire. Maybe they haven't got the infrastructure, maybe they haven't got the legal entity, maybe they haven't got the know-how. And at Velocity Global, we can help you hire and employ anywhere in 185 countries and growing monthly. So we're adding new entities every other week. And, just think about that. That's really a tool, a secret tool, as I call it, that not many companies know about, because you may have a top performer and they've moved to another country and you go, sorry, I have to say goodbye to you now, top performer, because I don't operate in this country. If you use Velocity Global to help you with that top performer, employ them in the country where they've moved to or where they're going to move to, you can actually do that compliantly wherever in the world. So you suddenly have a secret tool where, when we link it back to layoffs, when we link it back to the Great Resignation, when we link it back to, I want flexibility, I cannot be in one office, in the same office 3 days a week, you suddenly are looking at a world, Eric, where, just within the company here, internally, we are across 6 continents. We're in 52 countries just with our own employees. We are truly a global company. And, remote work anywhere, asynchronous work, all of those terms, all of those buzzwords, they become reality, and they become an enabler of business performance, of high performance, of going, we need the stuff done. It doesn't matter where and how we need it done. And you separate yourself quite quickly from the entire argument about, I need you here 3 days a week. I need to monitor what you're doing. I need to watch over you. And you base it on trust. And you say, I need you to deliver this. And if you deliver it, as long as you deliver it, you're here for a job. I pay you, you give me the services, that you give me your time. I don't actually care so much where you are and when you do it. As long as I know, we're compliant, we've set you up in the right way, you're all kind of set up properly, you've got your equipment. It kind of becomes very simple suddenly. Companies care, right? Companies say, look, you've got to be here 3 days a week. You've got to do this. You've got to do that. You've got to be in that one location. And the reality, Eric, is that people have lives. You called me a woman earlier. Let me talk about this a little bit. Maybe in the past, when you and I were growing up, maybe it was the woman who was looking after the kids. Maybe it was the woman who needed flexibility. Maybe it was the woman who needed to work part-time. Maybe it was the woman who needed time off, or, rush out earlier because there was a school pickup or a nativity play. Today's world, we are all human beings. We have different lives. We have different responsibilities. And it is everyone out there who is desperately trying to balance life and work, different priorities, maybe caring priorities, maybe parents in a different country, maybe loved ones who are in a hard situation. You need to go and spend some time with them. It doesn't mean a holiday. It doesn't mean you're not going to be working. But this concept of sitting in one place every single day, and that equaling success, career success, that equaling productivity, that equaling the right to be promoted, is that our reality? That's the question for you and the listeners out there. It is not the woman, it is the human beings who want to have an impactful life, who want to have a meaningful life. We have people in this world who have more than one job because they have to. And so how do we make sense of all of that? And how do we remove the barriers and the limitations that we ourselves as human beings, as business leaders, as CEOs, as people leaders have placed on our people? That's a big question.
So on one hand, I absolutely love the concept, right? I mean, you guys, the company opens up the doors globally to find tremendous talent all around the world, and you help that be compliant. I get it. On the other hand, as a patriotic American, I got to ask you this question. So you said you talked to a friend in San Francisco, her whole neighborhood's laid off. So now you have a company in that same similar neighborhood that has an opportunity to help the economy in that community by hiring those people, right? So they're not foreclosing on their homes, they're not losing important things. But you guys opened up the doors to, maybe a less expensive area, maybe to India or the Philippines, where people don't need to make as much as they do here in the States. And companies are going to go where it's more obviously advantageous for them. So now they can hire somebody to do that same work outside of this community, right? Do you see that as a challenge?
Eric, I truly appreciate your question. And, I share some data points with you. The data is, Velocity Global, but also our clients. We're not an outsourced provider, and I have not seen a single client who's abandoned their local neighborhood and who's outsourced, to India, as your example may suggest. So, if I look on kind of my own the doorstep that I have here with Velocity Global, we have people in California, we have people anywhere, and you wouldn't have it any other way, because if you did close all your operations and you decided to go to another place where maybe you don't have any of the knowledge, maybe you don't even know the people, that is not straightforward necessarily, because what are you getting into? It reminds me of the 80s and 90s where companies were outsourcing their call centers to cheaper locations, and sometimes it backfired. Sometimes, well, very often the clients weren't happy. There were language barriers, there were technology barriers, there were all sorts of barriers. So what I want to offer you today, Eric, is a slightly different lens where, it is not either or, but it's, you do that, you build your local communities, you impact your neighborhood in a good way, and at the same time, you can also impact the world. You can have a positive impact, globally. And there are a lot of companies, including the ones that have been laying off, they also have global presences. They need people in other locations. That it is very rare today that you will have a company that has a headquarter and a kind of base in one country, in one state, and is successful globally. We've heard the stories of the companies that say we're global. They have 2 people in London, 1 person in France, 1 person in Singapore. That's not global. The companies of today's world, the successful companies, they have gone global. They have presence in lots of different places in the world. So I want to offer that lens, and it's you invest locally in your communities, and at the same time, you have the opportunity to look for talent anywhere in the world.
Yeah, that's a fair lens. Okay. So let me ask you this, with, still old school, it sounds like a lot of people, a lot of organizations want to bring people back into the workforce, but most of the public would like to probably work remote. Obviously not all. What challenges, or what are some best practices for leaders to connect with remote teams, get them engaged, motivated, and help them hit their goals?
It's a good question. And, I want to, tell your listeners, there's no secret source. There's no book you can buy. I've bought all the books. I've got every single book on remote work and asynchronous work. And, I can give you all the titles. It's challenging. It's complex. It can take a long time to get it right. And you have to be open to learning and listening and starting again all the time. I mentioned we have, 6 continents, we have 52 countries just internally within the company. I have 17 countries across 6 continents in my own people team. And we have literally lost the ability to connect on a Zoom call like you and I are doing right now, because it's 4 a.m. for someone, or maybe it's 1 a.m, or maybe it's 11 p.m. And you go, did I build this the right way? Is this working? How are we going to connect? And, ultimately, I think you need a team that, that gets those challenges, a team that is able to flex, but also a team that holds dear those boundaries. Burnout is on the rise. You asked earlier about the challenges that we're facing as a world and as people leaders. Burnout has never been more problematic than it is today. And I think remote work and work anywhere, is also connected to that in some form or shape, because you can no longer leave the office and be done. You're never done, Eric. You're never done. You are sitting at work. You live at work suddenly. You cook at work. You there's no escape. And the wisdom I can offer here is, build your team of intention. Make connections, a high priority. If you are a leader and you're too busy to connect with your global teams, you're too busy for those one-on-one check-ins, you're too busy to make time, it's going to hurt you. It's going to be difficult to keep that team engaged, keep that team aligned with the goals. What are the priorities for next year? Got to be able to articulate that. Could be over Slack, could be over email, could be a video message, could be a Zoom call, it could be one-on-ones, but be available. And let's talk about this remote work. We have people suddenly who, they may have disabilities, they may have mental health challenges. Remote work may suit them a lot better suddenly, because they can accommodate their needs much better. But they may not speak up in calls. They may be more comfortable with a video message, a recording or a Slack message. Get to know your team a little bit. How do I get the best out of Eric? How do I get the best out of Sarah? Now, you cannot tailor make and have a kind of bespoke, model there for each and every employee on your team, but remote work offers you that opportunity to get to know the human being and understand, how do I get the best out of that person? And it's not a universal answer. And then you put global and cultures and languages and time zones into the mix, and it becomes really interesting, truly.
Oh yeah. No, I was so I'm prior service military, and back in 2004, I had a chance to go to Guantanamo Bay, Cuba, where we housed detainees from the war. And part of my job was to lead the linguists who were there. And their job was to, if there's letters coming in, they had to translate the letters. And then analysts would see if there are any hidden messages. But picture this trailer where linguists are sitting there, but they're from Afghanistan, from different parts that don't get along, right? They're Iraq, different parts that don't get along, India or Pakistan. And it's like at 25 years old, I got a real rude awakening for how just cultural differences play such a huge part. So, but the advantage I had was that everybody was in the room. I could schedule them certain ways. That was, it took a little bit of time to figure out preferences, and we worked 3 shifts. So that was pretty cool. But what do you recommend, or if I was sitting down with you as the experienced HR leader that you are, as a leader in one of the companies or one of the teams, and I said, Sarah, I need help. I don't know how to connect with, these 5 people. What can I do to be a better leader for them? What would your recommendation be?
It's probably going to be a really simple one. Make time, listen, understand. And maybe those were the principles that you applied all those years ago in that room, because you don't know everything. There's differences. There may be feelings that aren't all positive. There may be some resistance. There may be some, feelings of, who is this new leader? What do they want to talk to me about? Why does the boss want to talk to me? Why do they want to make time for me? Is this suspicious? Should I be worried? Going back to that HR comment, do you only encounter HR when you're about to get fired, when there's a problem? So build that trust over time so it doesn't get to that. As a leader, if you enter the room and that's the first time that person has, seen you or spoken with you, that will be scary. So build that trust, make the time, seek to understand and ask questions, because I cannot know everything. So many countries, so many continents, so many lives, so many people. We had 2 acquisitions last year. So overnight, you have a ton of people coming in. It's like a new hire. They are unknown entities to you. Make some time, seek to understand, ask questions, and ask for their best practices as well. What do they need from me? What do they need from me as their leader so they can be successful? That would be my starting manual for that question.
I can imagine that can be such a shock in some areas of the world, because leadership is very positional in some areas, right? Like I maybe a year and a half, 2 years ago, I got hired by an IT company in Maryland, but they have a pretty big presence in Ukraine. And my role was to help their marketing department, help their sales department sell a little bit more. And I could see that, when the CEO from Maryland would fly over to Kiev, the way they treated him as a leader was way different. Like here, he was just one of the guys. There, he's like, he's up here, and there, yes, sir, like whatever you want, boss, So I can imagine, like, if a leader asks somebody, especially, I'm not sure how things are done in the UK. In America, in a lot of places, I feel like companies that I deal with, leaders are working within the team. Sometimes the best teams, you don't even know who the official leader is. They're all working together. So if that guy connects with somebody somewhere else in the world and says, tell me how you'd like me to lead you, that would be
You
such
can
a
freak
shock.
out, right? You can
You'd
freak
freak
out at
out.
that moment. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Yeah. No,
One thing, Eric, I would say is that, I've heard a lot of companies talk about this as well, and this is my experience too. I think being on Zoom has created a more equal kind of playing field. So I hear you, and I think it's true, and I've seen it too. And imagine this in the past, maybe someone senior or the leader or the CEO wanted to talk to you, and you had to step into this big office, and maybe it was very spacious or very glamorous, or it kind of it intimidated you. Now you just have the head in the kind of on the screen, and it has made us all more human. Height and maybe weight and maybe the kind of, I'll give you an example. So, one of the past companies I worked for, very successful, revenue leaders, sales guys, account executives, charming in person, take the clients out for meals. Hey, have a beer afterwards, the charm kind of, leads into the sale, and, and you've removed that over Zoom. You've removed that over the kind of virtual, world of work. And I've seen a lot of these people fall on their faces because that charm suddenly disappeared. That charm, they weren't able to replicate it on Zoom. Maybe you can, but a lot of them is like, okay, what do I do now? I don't have a toolbox anymore. I don't have a manual. What worked for me in the last few years, what gave me, made me rich, gave me all the commission, made me hit the sales targets. I don't have it anymore. And a lot of people have started from scratch in this new world where they've gone, okay, actually, what matters now? And who do I need to be as a leader? Who do I need to be as a person? And so I would add to your comment that, I think it's also an incredible opportunity for us to be human beings, and that hierarchy, especially when you talk about different cultures and different countries, maybe be even helping that in some way by removing that, that awkward, I'm a princess in a palace, and if you want to step into my room, it's all scary and intimidating. Maybe we are reducing that a little bit in places.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. Are you a fan of personality assessments when merging companies or bringing new people on?
I love this question, and you can see me smile. I've used all of the ones available under the sun. I'm a fan of many. I take all of them with a pinch of salt.
Oh, absolutely.
Because they give you a glimpse into someone's personality, into someone's ways of working. I think it's really helpful. I was with my leaders together in person over the last few days, which is a rare moment of beauty. And we were actually talking about the user manuals. What do we need to know about each other? Because I'm assembling a brand new team right now. What are the buttons not to press? What's lethal? Where do you not go? How do I get the best out of you? How do you get the best out of me? And so I really appreciate all of those approaches. I have all the books. I've done all the kind of, assessments over the years. I've got printouts from 20 years ago, how when I went through interview processes, how I may have been perceived or rated. And they are super interesting. Again, when we look at remote work and, cultures, different locations, different languages, use them with a pinch of salt, because it's not black and white ever. You may have a brilliant candidate, but they've struggled to understand the question. In their mother tongue, easy peasy, high IQ, high EQ, no problem. So again, I want to offer a global lens here, where it's not one world and one language and one understanding. It's what are the different ways to really get to know someone a little bit. And yeah, personality tests, back to your questions, absolutely one way of doing that.
Yeah, no, totally agree. And I couldn't agree with you more that it cannot be the 100% be all when you're evaluating someone or considering to hire them. Sarah, what were you hoping I would ask you that I haven't asked you yet?
So I was reading about your podcasts, and there was something about revolutionary, different, special, unique. What are your listeners hoping for? What are your listeners looking for? And maybe it's out of the box. Maybe it's something that, is different. And, I say that because, it goes back to the kind of where did I come from, the kind of sales background, the perception of HR at the time. What do we need HR to be these days? How do we need the people teams to support us? And that's very, very different to even 2 or 3 years ago.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more on that. So with Velocity Global, you just said, what are your listeners hoping for? I mean, some of the listeners here are probably ones who are being told to get back to work, and maybe they're not feeling so good about that decision. From an employee or potential employee standpoint, what does it look like if they wanted to get noticed by Velocity Global or get, placed in a pool of potential candidates that your company clients are seeing?
Thank you so much for the question, Eric. And one data point, I think back in the summer, so a couple of months ago, we had 150 open vacancies, internally, and we had over 100,000 job applicants flocking to that website, applying for 150 roles. Now, we're a small company, we help a lot of big companies. We help a lot of people around the company, around the world. But that's a lot of applications for 150 vacancies. What does that tell you? It tells you that there's indeed that huge appetite, that flexibility is more important than it has ever been. People have had that flexibility. Many people have had that flexibility, and they don't want to give that up. And you ask about, the kind of, what does it take to be successful? And I want to be very vulnerable and very open with the listeners, because I have also learned some painful lessons over the last few years. When someone comes to you and says, I want to work remotely, this is my dream job, my dream company, my dream proposition, that does not give them the qualification. That doesn't give them the, the kind of ticket to success, because a lot of people say that. But the world of working remotely and asynchronously isn't necessarily a straightforward one. You have to have discipline. You have to, protect your boundaries. You have to know who you are. Let's talk about this. There's an argument that's out there, I'm sure you've heard it as well, where people say, if you're young and you're just starting out in your career, it is suicide to work remotely, because who are you going to learn from? Those days when you went into the office or you were in the army and you learn from people in person. You copy them, you see what they're doing right, you see what they're doing wrong. That makes you amazing at some point later in the future, because you've had role models. Virtual role models, work anywhere role models. Who are they? How do you find them? And so, I want to say very clearly that no world is perfect. No world is straightforward. And you have to be very mindful and intentional about who you bring into these type of companies, because trust plays a really big role. You cannot just outsource and say, my executive assistant is too expensive in the Netherlands, so tomorrow I'm going to hire one in Malaysia and it's going to be brilliant, right? There's a lot of implications there, and you've kind of hinted at that earlier. So be intentional and find the right personalities, the right caliber of people. Do they have the right skills? Can they survive in this highly complex world that it is? And, we've talked about some of the challenges there. It's a book that has yet to be written, in my view. It brings a lot of benefits, a lot of, very impactful, movements around the world. But it is not as simple as opening the door and saying, in you come, you want to work remotely, you've got a degree, come and work for us. And so we are still refining that secret sauce, I would say, Eric. Generally speaking, though, if you are listening and you are interested in joining a company like Velocity Global, you have to, have an open mind, have a can-do attitude, be part of building something truly amazing, truly special. We're looking for builders here, not cruisers. If people are coming to cruise or to take orders, we need people to inspire us. I was talking to my own team not that long ago, and I said, look, you need to come to me with inspiration. I cannot lead and instruct you every single day, every single moment. So different to the army, right? Very different. I need people to come to me, and that is across different cultures. And people need to say, look, I've seen this. This works well. Could we try this? What about this? What about that? I'm hearing this. And so, you are looking for people who are, self-starters, people who are self-motivated, because Eric, who motivates you remotely? When you are sitting in your room, maybe you don't have a family, maybe you live by yourself, and you go onto the laptop every single day, same move, same seed, same window, same wallpaper. How are you going to be inspired? How are you going to be motivated? You're not. You're going to be as bored as anything at that moment. So I talk about it, mental health, resilience, burnout, because it's so, so, so important. It's just so different when you are in an office together. So I wanted to call out some of the challenges and opportunities all at the same time.
Okay. Let me back up just a little bit because I may not have understood this completely. So Velocity Global, you guys are a company and you hire people for Velocity Global, but then also you're a platform or a bridge for global organizations or organizations who want to have access to global talent pool. They can use your services to hire the right people in a compliant way for the country that they're hiring for. But how do they find that person in a different country? So I guess to simplify the question, do they have to find the person, have the candidate, and then bring them to Velocity Global and say, hey, make this compliant? Or does Velocity Global offer a global pool of people that these companies can search from?
So a couple of data points. If I look at the clients that we have, the majority of them bring their own people. So I'll give you a real life example. I was that client 8 years ago. My VP in Latin America called me. I was, in Europe at the time, and he said, I've got a bunch of people in Mexico and Brazil. I'd love to hire them. They're really amazing. Can you make it happen, Sarah? And I couldn't make it happen without a company like Velocity Global, because we didn't have a legal entity set up there. We didn't have any kind of, foundations there. And so I found Velocity Global, and we were able to hire these people. That is what we are seeing still today. In the majority of the cases, the client has already identified someone. Maybe it's someone that worked with them and they've moved country, and the client is looking to retain that high performer. Maybe the client has found someone where they don't have a legal entity and they want to employ that that person or that group of people. But we also, Eric, of course, have the clients who go, actually, we're interested in going to Costa Rica or Ukraine or Norway or Ireland, wherever it may be in the world, and we don't actually have the talent identified. We have lots of partnerships across the world where we can then help the client find those people. But we're not an employment agency, right? We're not a recruitment agency, to answer your question.
Got it. Okay. Yeah, no, that clears it up. Awesome, Sarah. Well, thank you so much. I learned a ton from you. I had no idea this existed. And so I really appreciate your time and being on the show today. Thank you.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, good luck to you at Velocity Global. Hey guys, if you enjoy this show, hit like, hit subscribe, join us in our Facebook group. I look forward to meeting you and talking to you soon.